Okay, I am live. Gonna be talking about Airbnb. It's my first time live in a little bit, and we're gonna be talking about Airbnb buying versus leasing with Miss Alisha Arnold. So let me, Alisha, if you just, I think you need to request to join. I think that's how it works. You know, it's been a minute, like I said, or maybe you already did. Here we go. All right, so yes, I just realized this is my first live since last year, but excited to have you guys on. Thank you all for joining us. Feel free to ask us questions as we go. And this is Miss Alisha. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm great.
Awesome. So happy to have you, ready to dive right in. So for the people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your, well, let me introduce myself too. So people who are new to my lives, my name is nanaalicenyarko, and I teach people how to start their own Airbnb with or without buying property. And I've got courses and ebooks and all that good stuff you can always check out in my bio. Now, Miss Alisha, and am I saying it right? Alisha,
Yeah,
right?
you are.
Okay. I'm really happy to talk to you because I know with most of your units, or if not all of them, you buy. And most of my units, well, all of the units I've had, I have either done the master leasing method or rental arbitrage, or I have co-hosted them. So tell us a little bit who you are, what you do, and all that jazz.
Sure. So we're very similar, Airbnb coaches, experts. So basically, I do one-on-one coaching with my students, and I also have an online course similar to yours. But we cover slightly different things. Yeah, I cover kind of how to set up the space once you already have it in my course. And yes, I do buy all of my rentals, but it would all like my method would also work if you did do like arbitrage or leasing, but I don't tell you how to do that part. I just tell you how to, like, once you have the place, I kind of tell you how to set it up.
Gotcha.
I do have some information on how to figure out your profit and loss before you buy. So
Nice.
that's an interesting tool, and I have a little YouTube video for that. So I could send you the links to that. Maybe I'll put it in the chat during this if I can figure out how to do that.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that I know, right? Figure how to do what,
I'm like, what do I do with my hands?
what are some of the things people should look for when they are looking to buy a unit? Because like I've been saying this for a while now, but that is my next goal, is for my next unit to be a purchase instead of co-hosting. And they're not to say one way is better than the other, but that's just kind of where I am. I want to start building a portfolio, start building some assets. And that's the one thing when you do rental arbitrage or co-hosting, it's great for cash flow, it's great for stacking paper, but those are not your properties, those are not your assets. So what are some of the things that people should kind of keep in mind when they're looking to buy?
Okay, so first off, I was thinking of some of the differences between buying and leasing. And I think leasing is great because you can get started quick, there's cash flow involved, and buying is a much more involved process. It takes longer, it takes more cash up front, but then you're building equity in your property. So that's the difference, right? And it's real estate, so real estate over time is always going up and to the right, but you are assuming some risk. I mean, we've all lived through a humongous real estate crash, which is really can be scary, and you're assuming that risk when you actually own the property. So it's not just carefree wealth accumulation, but
Right.
yeah, I think that overall that's that's one of the biggest bonuses of going through that, like all the money, all the time, all the effort, to actually buy the properties that you're using for your short-term rentals, because years down the road, they've built equity, and then you can actually pull that equity out through different types of loans to buy other properties, and then it kind of snowballs and becomes easier.
That's like the beautiful part that I'm looking forward to is that, I've been doing like mad research. I'm kind of in the place where I tell my students not to be, which is a bit of analysis paralysis. Like, I'm doing all the research, just go for it. But the beauty that what you mentioned is that, once you get one property, as long as it has some equity in it, you can use that to just continue to grow your portfolio. And one of the nice things about the way that I teach is that you can use the cash flow from, rental, arbitrage, or co-hosting. If you set that money aside and you're not using it for putting it back into your business or whatever, and you're putting that money to the side, that can be your capital for your purchase, so that then you get into that game of actually owning the asset. So how long would you say the process took you to buy your first one?
So typically, once you find a place, which takes some research and looking, and that can range, right? Because you can either really have like a solid idea if you've done like the profit and loss exercise first. If you guys don't know what profit and loss is, it's basically how much money you think you'll make and how much the expenses are and what the profit will be left over once you do the property or buy the property and start the Airbnb. So basically, once you figure that out and figure out your price range and what area you're going to look in, which takes a minute, right? It's an exercise. Like I said, I'll share that video with you guys. It's just a YouTube video that I put together, and it shows you how to kind of go on Airbnb and take a look at the area that you want to buy in and look at what your competition is. So basically, I'd start off with like when I bought this place, for instance. Okay, I wanted a wine country Airbnb. And I ended up buying in Lodi, California. I looked in Napa, I looked in Healdsburg. It was way too expensive for what I could afford at the time. So this is the wine country that I landed on. And then I would get on Airbnb and I would look, okay, so this place sleeps 10 people. It has a pool. So I do kind of an analysis of, okay, what are people getting per night and how booked are they? Mm-hmm. So for this place, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like a 50% occupancy rate. And you want to be really realistic and also kind of conservative about that, because anything above and beyond is money in the bank, but you don't want to be left out in the cold, right? Thinking you're going to make.
Yeah, you don't want to be making those huge financial decisions based on hope. like, oh yeah, it looks like some of these people are getting 80% occupancy, but if you, like you're saying, run your numbers based on the 50% that you're seeing more consistently, and then you get 80%, awesome sauce. But you went in the numbers knowing that you'll be good at 50%, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, and I definitely encourage people to be conservative, right? Because there's also seasonality, and when you're doing an analysis, you might not know what that seasonality is in the year. For instance, like I've had this rental since 2017, so I know in the winter it gets a lot less bookings. In the summer, it's a wedding area, so there's tons of weddings and it's very booked up. I have a pool, it's like 110 degrees here. So it's popular for some reasons, and you'll basically learn those things as you go, or you can try to contact some hosts in the area and talk to them about the seasonality. That's a really good thing to do, because it's like, surprise, you have no bookings in the winter and you have to make all of your income, in that 6 months when it's popular, and that's going to affect like how much you need to charge for your nightly price. Also, some of those hosts that are making that are booking 80%, maybe they're advertising on other platforms, or they are staying in it themselves, so it looks more booked than it is, and it's not. So definitely in this like profit and loss analysis walkthrough that I have, it says to look at like a bunch of properties and like really spend time in there poking around.
Good thing too, in terms of choosing your location, knowing what kind of location you want to have. So like you went in, it sounds like you knew you wanted wine country, so you kind of probably had a little bit of idea of the seasonality on that. But like if you if you know that you want that kind of a property that has huge numbers in the summer and the spring, and you're okay with like the winters maybe being a bit slower, or do you, especially if you're someone who's going to be hosting somewhat remotely, like you don't have to host in your own backyard, right? Or do you want to host in more of a city like Atlanta or the DC metro area where you know that it's almost a year-round sort of city because they're, you know, especially pre-COVID and hopefully post COVID, I don't know. You know, it's a year-round city because there's always stuff going on. There's always, or it's a like the DC metro is the capital, so there's always like stuff going on. There's always something happening, right? Do you want to host in that sort of a location, or do you want to host in more of like a luxury, like, I mean, some of these places that get high summer seasons, right, and they're luxury properties, they're making like legit crazy amounts per night, right? They're doing like 500, 700,000 per night. So they're making, like you said, you're making all your money in that high season, and it keeps you good for the rest of the year. Like you're still profitable for the year. So those are the kind of things you want to think through as well.
I worked with one host. I believe her place was it was in like the East Coast on the beach somewhere. I feel like it was Rhode Island or something. And her seasonality was the summer because it was a beach property, and it's freezing cold there in the winter. So no one really wants to go on this beach property. So she started this chef experience in the winter months where a chef would come in and cook a gourmet meal with you and give you like a cooking lesson. And that got really popular and took care of all of her seasonality problems. So there's things that you can do that are really creative for
Yeah.
seasonality, but you know, you have to learn what that seasonality is first.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that idea though. Like, I think that's great, especially because that's going to appeal to those locals who, you know, they just might want to get out, have a nice little date night with their boo. Um, So yeah, if you guys have any questions, this is definitely for a good time to ask them about buying or leasing. What also, where are you guys from? Like drop that in the chat where everyone is. Um, are you trying to host in your local area, or are you looking to host more remotely? Because I know in the last like 6 months to a year, a lot of locations have put in travel or short-term rental regulations. Is that something you ever, oh, I see Memphis, Atlanta, Orlando, Georgia. Awesome. Welcome, guys. DMV, yes, that's where I was for a very long time. DC, oh yeah, my DC crew's in the house. Sweet. New Orleans, Charlotte. Okay, so I know that a lot of locations have put in more strict regulations. So is that something you have been coming up against, Alisha?
Let's see. I haven't run into it with any of my properties. I mean that those things can change anytime, right? It's kind of scary. My property in Hawaii is in a building that's zoned vacation rental, and I bought that property knowing that. And if you're looking to buy and you're buying a condo or you're buying something that has like CCNRs, which are basically like the rules of condominium complexes, they're really huge Bibles of rules. And like when I bought my first condo, I was like, sign.
Right.
And then I realized this condo was owner occupied, so I could not rent it out afterwards. I mean, I wasn't looking to do short-term rentals. It was way before then, but I did want to hold on to it, and I couldn't because I couldn't rent it out. It's really super important that you learn all those rules, that you look up the rules in the cities that you're looking to buy. I have a friend who had a friend who bought in Tahoe, and they just basically said, if you don't have a short-term rental in this area right now, then you can't have one. So they actually had a property, and they were holding off on starting a short-term rental, and now they can't do it.
Right.
So there's a lot of legislature and things like that, and it is really important to keep up on what's going on in your area, especially if you're buying somewhere like you're not living and you're not up on that stuff, and then what the rules of the buildings are and things like that. Yeah. What's your backup plan if all of a sudden you can't rent it?
that it's going to work not only for short-term rentals. Like, will this work for other things as well? Because you just never know.
Yeah, so your fallback, if you can't do a short-term rental, is long-term rentals, and you can get a little bit creative with that, as you know, with like I call them like midterm rentals.
Yep.
So it's not the short flips of like a typical Airbnb, but like if you're renting to like travel nurses, they have like usually like 3-month stays, and I know you have a course on that, so it's
Yep.
really you probably know more about that than I do. I've been looking into it a lot lately because this rental that I'm living in right now, I've been kind of playing around with like what scenario I want to do. I'm opening it back up for renting in June. So there's like those mid-length rentals, and you can do that for people who are traveling, and you can split the space up. Like this place has 4 bedrooms, so you can split it up. So if it was travel nurses, like 4 nurses could stay in here together, and then you're renting like a shared space on Airbnb, but it would be long term because it's more than 30 days.
Right.
So I would like look at those scenarios, or if you just had to, get a family in here, what is the monthly rent, and can you actually support the property through these like weird times?
Yeah, I definitely have coached several people who have they wanted to buy out the jump, out the get-go, and I exactly what we just discussed. I said, let's run these numbers with multiple exit strategies, right? So like if you had to sell, will you make a profit? If you have to rent traditionally, will you make a profit? If you're able to short-term lease or do short-term rentals, will you make a profit? And how much will that be? And that is going to save your behind so much, because I've bought condos before too, and you really, really have to know what you're getting yourself into. And I know it's exciting when you're buying, especially if it's your first one, and they put these stacks of papers in front of you. You're like, whatever.
You're like, sign it.
Pretty, like, so. And this was before, some of you may or may not know, I am an attorney, although I don't actively practice, and nothing we say here is legal advice. Nothing we say here constitutes a client-attorney relationship. I just got to put that out there. But, before I was an attorney, I bought my first place and I signed all these documents. And then I was just simple things I was trying to do in my own condo that I owned, and they're like, nah, you can't paint that color, you can't do this, you can't do that. So you have to really be aware of what you're purchasing. So I am going to start looking at some of these questions. I see Nashville looking to host remotely. Cool. So someone wants to know, how much do you have to invest to start? I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll add my 2 cents.
If you're buying, so I'll cover that, and then you can cover the other piece.
Yeah.
These are just, it ranges. There's no solid answer, right? Because basically a typical loan is 20% down, right? And then sometimes if it's a rental property, if you call it a vacation home, you'll get one rate. If you call it a rental property, it's almost another rate. And sometimes you have to put 30% down. But then there's special loans for certain things as well. So like for my first condo that I bought, I just met with a bank, and it wasn't like a typical big bank. It was one of the smaller ones, and they gave me a 3% down rate. And I was buying in California, so that still was a lot of money for me at the time. And I also didn't have to pay, what is the homeowners? It was like, there's like the homeowners insurance, or there's some other mortgage insurance. Usually when you have those like low interest rate mortgages. So I got both of those things waived. All I have to say is like, where there's a will, there's a way. And like figuring out like what you want and what the price range is step one. I always say like kind of visualize that, figure out what your goals are, and then figure out the how. It's like the what and then the how. Because I know a lot of people, I'm seeing all these reels right now, and it's like realtors and like, how do you know you're not going to get a mortgage? How do you know? And it's true. There are a lot of things that banks can do for you. There's lots of different kinds of loans. You could probably leverage your current home mortgage if you have that. There's lots of different ways to do it. So, but typically I would say 20% down, but like it could be more, it could be way less.
Yeah.
To get your first property. And then actually in my course, I have this spreadsheet of like startup costs, and I literally went through every single thing in this house I bought to set it up and price it out. I spent well, okay, so you have to think like, does it need repairs? Does the house need repairs? Does it need work? Does it need to be painted? And like, is it partially furnished? Is it my house that I'm turning into a rental? And then you have to start kind of making a list. Or is it no furniture, no nothing? You have to start everything up from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say like this house is 1,800 square feet. It had nothing in it. It needed some little repairs, but I bought pretty turnkey with this place, and I think I spent around $10,000 to furnish it. That's just like a baseline, but I mean, you can thrift stuff. You can get stuff on consignment from shops.
Right.
You can get super creative.
4-bedroom, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good for that size property, I think.
And I had a lot of the furniture like given to me, and I was creative. That was kind of on a budget, but there's a lot of things that you might not think that you need, like 3 sets of sheets for every bed, and probably like 3 times as many towels as you need, and all that stuff is kind of a lot of the startup cost.
I actually had a private Q&A with my BNB from Scratch students, and one of my students was saying how having those backup sheets that we all talk about, like making sure you have multiple sets, saved her behind, because one of her cleaners just happened to miss a cleaning, and so she was resending them, but the people got in pretty late. They were very chill. You don't want this to happen, by the way. This is like not an ideal situation.
Nightmare.
It is, yeah, it's a true nightmare. But they were able to like replace the sheets themselves and just make it through the night. She refunded them that night and all that good stuff. But there's a reason for our madness, if I like to, the way I like to call it. There's a reason to have all these backups and things like that. So I think that's great. I'll answer the question for leasing and co-hosting. So if you are leasing, it's going to be like, if you've ever leased a property before, you know how to do this process, really. It's going to be that first month's rent and whatever the deposit is. So it's going to depend on how big this property is. Are they doing any specials? Are you starting with a studio, or are you going out and getting a 4-bedroom rental? All that's going to depend on, factor into the cost. And then it's the cost of furnishing the place. And like Alisha was saying, there are many ways you can do this. You can do it high end, or you can do it on the budget that you have, right? I like to share furniture stores and furniture recommendations and places that I like, depending on whether or not you're going high end, middle, or lower budget. Like one of my old mentors, I love the way he would call it, you're doing Walmart, Target, or Nordstrom, right? So you've got and there's no right or wrong with any one of those, because you've got travelers at all different sorts of budgets, and you can make a profit at all different sorts of budgets. So that's one way to look at it. With co-hosting, though, the beauty of co-hosting is that you really don't have any upfront costs for the most part, because it's someone else's property that you are hosting for them. So you don't have the cost of rent, you don't have the cost of a deposit, you don't have the cost of like your down payment for a mortgage, right? You're hosting someone else's property for them. So there are pros and cons to rental arbitrage and co-hosting. Co-hosting is a fantastic way to get started, because like I said, you don't have any of those costs. You're hosting someone else's property for them. It's a great way to scale if you enjoy that business and you're really good at managing people as well as properties, because you have to remember you're hosting someone else's property. So the cons, depending on your personality with co-hosting, are going to be that it's someone else's house or home, and you still have to work with that person, and their final decisions are usually theirs unless they're very flexible. So you're just going to have to decide which one you want and where you are, right? I've done both. I liked both. I had some clients that I co-hosted for that were awesome. I had some that it's okay to fire your client if it's just not a good fit, right? If they're not working well, if they're not responsive, because you know they still have to upkeep the property and all that good stuff. So, but co-hosting is great because you're spending a lot less, or you're not really spending much at all to get started. So hopefully that answers your question. I know we didn't give you hard numbers, and that's because it's just going to depend on what size unit you're going to get, right? Like if you're getting a studio, maybe that's like $2,000-3,000. But if you're getting a 4-bedroom, that's like 10K, maybe more, depending on how you decide to furnish it. Okay. Another question someone said is, and I'm gonna try. I'm not great at reading these names, but I'm gonna try. Anissa created, maybe. She said, "Is it possible to arbitrage a timeshare?" And my answer for that is going to be, it's possible, but you would have to really read it's just like most timeshares is like a condo. So you have to read whatever the rules are and the regulations are for that location. I know I have stayed in Airbnb timeshares before, and almost everyone in the timeshare, that's what they were literally doing, is like when they're not staying there, they're using it for a short-term rental Airbnb and making their money that way. So I would just look at your specific timeshare and see if you can actually do that. They'll let you know. How can you get, oh, I'm sorry, Alisha, did you have anything to add there?
I don't have any experience with that actually. So
Cool. How can you get sponsorship or grants to help you start where you are not just using all of your own money? I'll go ahead and say that I know there are a lot. You have to basically do your research for your local area, because a lot of times there are local grants. Like when I lived in the DC area, I cannot remember the name of the grant, but there's like a lot of first-time home buyer grants. And if you are going to be living in the property, so like I know in the DMV in DC they have some new regulations, so you want to do your homework on that. But you know, if you're living in the property and maybe you bought a duplex or a multi-unit, right? So you can get a grant or use like FHA, because you're still going to live in the property, but it's a multi-unit. So you can use some of the other units for short-term rentals. So you just have to really look at your local area to find the sorts of grants that are going to work. In my course, I do kind of have a list of like some general ones that you can use, but it's not exhaustive. It's not like everyone in the country. So you want to look in your local area and see, because a lot of times they do have a lot of good stuff for first-time home buyers, or if you're buying in certain locations that they're trying to increase home ownership, they'll have grants and things like that for those locations, even sometimes if you are investing and not planning to live in the property yourself.
Yeah, I would say also you can get investor money. If you know, there's different ways to do that as well if you're looking for help to get started.
Yeah, like private money. There are a lot of people out there that they just have money and they want to invest it, and they want to give you terms, and it's an investment for them because you're paying them every month just like you would pay the bank. So there are lots of ways to find these sorts of investors, like going to these investor meetups and things like that. Is a really, really smart way to get money. And they're going to want to know your track record, or like, you know, what you plan on doing with it. But there are a lot of options out there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
What do you ladies do with your properties during the slow season? So me personally, I like to host to travel nurses because they work year round. They have no days off. So that's what I do in the slower seasons. And I'll also kind of work with my pricing and adjust it. I think you had a great idea that your student used their property in a really cool, creative way.
Yeah, okay, so 2 things on this. One, try to buy somewhere that doesn't have seasonality. Number 1 tip, my Hawaii property is like 98% 8% booked all the time. So there's no seasonality there. It's warm all the time. So that is my number one tip. Find no seasonality,
Yeah.
which is difficult, but happens. And then I try different strategies. I'm always trying different things. So this property, Lodi Landing, so is wine country. Like I was saying, it's very popular in the summer with weddings and things like that, but it cools off here in the winter. My place has a pool. No one can swim in it in the winter. So I'm pretty much always booked on the weekends, and then a lot of open weekdays, which I think a lot of people experience. So I've tried two different strategies. One is I basically like up the nightly. I think I had like a 2-night minimum on this property when I was renting it before. But when you lower the prices, it's really not worth it to have like a 2-night minimum. So you can up the nightly minimum on certain days in Airbnb in the back end. So you can say like this week, I'm lowering the price. It's 5 days that aren't booked, but you have to book 4 of these days at this price. Or I'm not going to let you stay here. So that's one thing, is like bundling days and lowering prices so that you can get booked, because then you only have one cleaning fee for that time. That can really help. And then the other thing that I did that was really successful is I duplicated my listing. So this listing sleeps 10 people, right? So even though the prices were kind of low during the weekday, and I even looked like at, smaller places for 2 people versus like what I was charging, people still weren't booking it. I felt like they were intimidated by how large the house was, or they just felt like it wasn't for them because it was for so many people. So I duplicated the listing, and I said that it was only for 4 people, and I took off some of the pictures of the bedrooms and lowered the price and only made that calendar available for weekdays. And I would open it up when those days weren't booking, like a little bit beforehand,
Right.
and would book those. And when they would come to stay, we would lock off all the other bedrooms that they wouldn't stay in. So my cleaning fee was less. I was getting booked up by I was targeting people that were traveling for work. They were never here. They were always out working. I mean, this was before COVID, so probably everyone's working. Probably people aren't traveling for work as much anymore, but that's probably starting to pick back up. So I just say, try things, get creative. I don't know, get into the Airbnb forums. There's a lot of Facebook groups where you can kind of ask people what they've tried. But those are 2 strategies that have really helped me book.
Yeah, I love that. That's working with that dynamically pricing your property, but also being on top of your property, right? Knowing when you have those unbooked days and just adjusting as you need to. And then getting creative. I have students who that's what they do, is they rent rooms in these bigger properties, and they are able to get really good bookings, and sometimes people rent rooms for long stays as well. They just don't need all this space, right? They're a single person, or they're only traveling for X amount of time. So that's a great way to get your place, making sure that you're booked consistently. Excuse me. Okay. Tove Honest says, I've been seeing a lot of ads for rental properties lately on Instagram. Are either of you familiar with this type of lending? I don't fully understand your question.
Yeah, I don't either.
So, if you're still here, just go ahead and ask it again, if you're able to more clearly. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, Vegan Foodie Choice Awards. Check her out, guys. She's one of my students. She said, I'm so thankful for the backup. Yes. For her, for sure. Sweet, I'm glad this was helpful. Awesome sauce. What about apartments? What about apartments? It's QT. What is your question? Are you asking, do apartment complexes allow for short-term rental leasing? If that's your question, they do. You just have to find ones that will work with you, and you have to know exactly how to approach them. So in my course, I do have full-on scripts and things that you can present to these property managers and apartment complexes to get them to let you lease. Some places are totally no, but there are a lot of them that will allow you to do this. And then I also leasing from what I like to call mom and pop landlords. So like, you know, me or Alisha, who might own a property and we own this one or two properties and we're not part of a big apartment complex, right? A lot of times they're a lot more flexible and are willing to work with you. So I show you how to do that in the program as well. But yes, apartments are available as an option. Oh, uh, uh, I'm still not pronouncing it right. I don't want to butcher your name. I'm sorry. Looking for grants. Check out Matthew Lesko's YouTube channel. That's a good share. She said, looking for grants. Look out or check out Matthew Lesko's YouTube channel.
Oh, cool.
Thank you. Is credit building a must with this as well, or do you need a business credit builder to start? So I started without business credit. But I started with one of my own apartments, and I was renting rooms. But co-hosting, you don't need to have perfect credit for. If you're leasing, ideally it would be great to have business credit. I show you how to get some funding in the course, but you can also start with your personal if that's what you need. But it's good to build business credit. What are your thoughts on that, especially if you're buying?
If you're buying, yeah, you probably need decent credit. I've bought all of mine through my name. I've tried to buy them through the business, and they're like, no, you have to back this up with your own personal credit. I'm not like I'm not that big. So I haven't gotten to the point where I'm like, oh, let's buy this in the business. I usually buy my properties and then transfer it into the LLC after I buy it. And you can usually only do that once you've paid the property off as well. So I would say yes. For buying, maybe it's not a hard and fast rule, but in my experience, you want decent credit to get a loan. If not, your interest rates are going to be higher. So it's still possible, but you're going to be paying more money to the bank.
Right. So even, and my piggyback off that is, even if you were to buy and you didn't have great credit and you ended up paying higher interest, you want to still work on your credit so that you can refinance and get out of that, because the interest that you pay, and I used to be a real estate agent, and when I was working as an attorney, I worked in real estate. So the interest rate that you pay, you could be buying at the same price, but because your interest rate is higher, your payment is just so much higher, and that's eating into your monthly profit. So I agree wholeheartedly that for that route, you got to get your credit in order. If your credit is not great, I would highly suggest starting with co-hosting, making some money, making sure that you do attack your credit and get it in order. Because even with rental leasing, you want to have there's still a lot of times, especially if you're new, even if they let you lease in your business's name, they may still want to pull your personal credit, right? So you do want to have that in good shape, but I wouldn't say don't try. That's
Where
again,
way.
right, exactly. Where there's a will, there is a way. And that's again where it comes into maybe working with those mom and pop landlords who are going to be a little more flexible, or like I said, co-hosting. Mm-hmm. So Denai asks, how do you host travel nurses? I have a full course on that, but I also do have an ebook bundle. So you can check either one out in my the link in my bio. And I know, Alisha, you're starting to dive into that world a bit too, right?
A little bit, yeah. I'm looking at starting this property, or I kind of have decided I'm not going that route, but I've looked into it and coached on that a little bit as well. But yeah, I would definitely defer to your course. I think that's like a really great way to get started. But basically, like, the gist of it is, you're probably, depending on the size of your place, you're basically you're splitting it up into a shared space, probably if it's a bigger space, so that you can get like the individual travel nurses, because they're only traveling singularly, or maybe in little groups of friends. Mm-hmm. But they don't want to like lease a whole place together necessarily. And typically their stays are like, what, 3 months ish?
Yeah, range. So it can be anywhere from a month. Average is like 3 months, but then you'll have some nurses who really enjoy their assignment and they'll extend. So I've had that happen. I've had a nurse who stayed with me um, almost, I want to say at least like 7 months or so, because she kept extending her assignment with the hospital. So but yeah, you put it into the right words. Like you're just gonna, you want to make sure if you're hosting travel nurses, and I go through this in more detail in the course. First and foremost, you want to make sure you're in a location that's close to a hospital, because that is like the main thing they're looking for. You got to think, especially now, right? Like I started hosting travel nurses pre-COVID, but now the more easy you can make it for their lives, the better. Like, because so the closer you are, if they could just roll out of bed and get to the hospital and roll home and be at peace, like the better it's going to be for you. So that's something that you want to, if that's the route you're thinking of, before you even like start, think of your location, think of the local hospitals in your area, and where you kind of want to be. So but yeah, I have you can check all that out on in my bio. So let's see. So
So
sorry, my voice is acting up. I was on our private Q&A before this for like an hour. I've been talking all day.
I saw a question come up that has kind of cycled by, but it was, is it hard to get started? Do you want me to take that one for a
Yeah.
second? Okay. So if I have to think about the short-term rental journey, I feel like getting started is like the upward hill of the roller coaster. And then once you get it started, I feel like it's, a lot of momentum, and I think it's pretty easy. Like I manage all my properties myself. Like once you get it started, I mean, obviously you're kind of constantly improving, but the setup I feel like is the hardest part. And I don't want to sugarcoat that. That my course kind of goes through like, okay, you have the property, right? But then who are you hiring, or who's doing the work? How do you set up your physical space? And then how do you set up your online listing? And those are like the three kind of main buckets that I go through. And it's a lot. I mean, I think that when I set up this property, I was here every weekend for 2 months, and shuttling pillows and blankets and things back and forth. It was kind of a lot, but it also depends on what state your house is in. Like if it's your house and it already has a lot of furniture in it and things like that, and you already have a lot of stuff to work with, it's more of like a decluttering and setting up your operations mission and your online listing. And if you don't have a place and you have to buy it and all of that stuff, then it is, I feel like it's the bulk of the work. Which is why, and I felt like when I did my Hawaii property, that was a really interesting challenge because it's on an island. Every single thing has to be like shipped in.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Oh God.
Yeah, and a lot of like I would go through and pick stuff out that I wanted, and it would be like, we don't ship to Hawaii. We don't ship to Hawaii. So like, and then shipping literally cost twice. Like the furniture was like X budget. It was just as much to ship the stuff there. And it's hard to find stuff there. I mean, it's not like you could just go to a store and buy anything you wanted. It was just, I wanted it to look a certain way. So that was like a challenge. And so that took me 4 months, and applying for the short-term rental license in Hawaii, I think is a 6-month process. So that's another thing to look at is like, okay, do you need a short-term rental license where you're applying? And some properties come with it if they were previously a short-term rental already, and maybe it can be transferred. But that was a really like interesting challenge that I hadn't run across before. So you also have to think, okay, like in the 6 months when I'm setting this thing up and it's not making any money, what am I doing there? Or like, can I do a long-term rental? Could I do, I don't know, like what is it? How are you going to survive that setup period basically?
Yep. Yeah, so for what I do, especially with the leasing and the co-hosting, I try to make it so that you can set yourself up in days, rather than taking a longer period if it's possible. But Alicia's totally right that in terms of is the process hard to get started, you have to kind of, for most people, it's pushing through the work it takes to get your first unit. Meaning, like she said, if you're buying, that's the whole process in itself. And then if you're leasing, you got to think that you got to remember that even though Airbnb and short-term rentals are more popular than they were a couple of years ago, you're still asking this landlord, this property manager, whoever it is, to do something outside of the box. You're asking them to do something that's untraditional. So you have to be willing to like take the time and hit the pavement, and reach out to as many of those prospects as possible. And I feel like that is the part that hinders a lot of people. But if you go in with that mindset that you're just going to keep going until you get the unit that you're looking for, and like I said, kind of taking those shortcut routes of approaching people who are going to be a bit more flexible, then it's not as hard to get started, right? I have students who literally have found their units in a week, right? So it just depends on how gung-ho are you. Are you only reaching out to one landlord a week or one landlord a month? Then it's going to be hard. Are you only reaching out to one owner once in a blue moon if you're trying to co-host, right? So those are the things that can make it a little easier for you. And then also it depends on the type of property you start with, right? So it depends on your budget, right? So if you've got a decent budget, then you can start with a bigger property if the numbers work in whatever location you've decided on. But maybe if you're starting with a smaller budget, a smaller property is going to be easier for you because if it's smaller, it's less furniture, it's less stuff that you need to get, right? So that's going to make it easier for you to begin as well. So you have to take all those factors into consideration. Is this your first time as an entrepreneur? You don't want to necessarily overwhelm yourself with a large property that's going to take all this work. So those are some of the things that can help. And then Alisha, you made a great point about like licenses. So again, that is, you're seeing more and more of that in different locations. So that also should factor into where do you want to host? Is it a place that has 6 months to get a license? Maybe that's not for you. Or is it a place that you just pay your money and boom, you got your license? Or is it a place that they don't require a license? So, right. So all that can factor into how hard or easy it is. But I started this as a side hustle. So I definitely think you can do that as well. I was working full time.
Yeah, I rented out my house when I was on vacation as the first, because I wanted to see if I liked it before I
Yeah,
bought a whole property. It's like being an Airbnb host is, it's a thing, it's a job, and if you don't like it, then it's a lot to go through to discover that. So I just I put all of my personal belongings in my bedroom. I would lock the door, and then
that,
I would rent out my
girl,
house.
we are here.
Twins.
Just take this stuff with me, lock all this up,
Yep.
pray for the best.
I just put 2 links in the chat. One is that profit and loss video on YouTube that I put in, and then the other one is like the tools that you need. It's like a spreadsheet of like just putting your profit and loss in, and there's something else in there, and I can't remember what it is because I haven't looked at it for a long time. But those are in the chat if you guys want to take a look. It just kind of walks you through how I reason my way through the pricing and when I'm buying something. So it might like help.
That's really helpful. I think a lot of people kind of skip that part.
Don't skip that. It's important.
Okay. What are the pros and cons if you will stay in the place as well? Oh, okay. What are the pros and cons? So the pros are, especially if you're in a location that's the only way you can host. So like some locations now, the regulations state that you can only host an Airbnb short-term rental, which most locations define as less than 30 days if it's your primary residence. So one of the pros of hosting where you stay is that you can actually host, right? Another pro is that maybe you can, you have a eye on things. You can see how things are running, and it's your own property, so you were already paying for it like people are paying your rent or your mortgage for you. So that's a huge pro. A con is that if the guest knows you're the host, they might just be a little more interactive than you want, and that's based on your personality. So some people love being that outgoing host who invites the guests over for dinner and blah blah blah. I'm an introvert. I know I'm on Instagram time, but I'm actually an introvert. So all that interaction is not the business for me. Like I I'm gonna say hi and keep it pushing. But so those are some of the pros and cons. But I think the biggest one is gonna depend on your location. Because like I said, some regulations now require that it be your primary residence. So that's just something to think about. I don't know, but how about you?
Um, Wait, circle back to what was the question again? I just kind of like got in my mind about everything you're talking about.
Oh yeah, is they said what are the pros and cons if you will stay in the place as well. So I guess if you're
So
it's your
if it's your house, okay. So I mean, for me, when I first started, it was like a nice like way to dip my toes in. I I left, so I didn't like stay there with them, but I did stay in the property, interstitched with them. I thought it
right.
was nice because I was there to clean it. I don't clean any of my properties by myself anymore, but it's really nice to kind of learn the ropes on like so that when you hire a cleaner, you're like, okay, this 1,800 square foot house needs to be flipped between 11 and 3, and like
Mhm.
what do we need to do to get that done, because that's difficult, right? But I mean, when you're just renting your own place and it's smaller, maybe it's nice to kind of like figure out all the operations and like how does this work. And when my guest shows up, I thought it was nice in a way because I could do like special touches for them, like I left them a bottle of wine and a handwritten note and just like things like that, which I would love to do in all my properties all the time, but it's like I'm not there and I don't want to pay someone to do that stuff necessarily.
Mhm.
So I think it's interesting. If you're actually like on the property and you're renting out like a little side unit, you can actually, I think that you can set boundaries where you are involved or you aren't involved
Yeah,
depending on your personality.
you can put that in your rules for sure, like
Yeah,
that. I'm available for like if you need anything, but otherwise I give my guests their space. you know.
exactly. And like, you can kind of stay in your house or whatever, and you're not like out there where they're chatting you up if you don't like that interaction. And then if you do, I mean, I've stayed at places where yes, people are super friendly and they give you tons of recommendations and it's really nice. But also have to think about your guests, because not every guest likes that either. So like if your guest is super introverted and you're extroverted and you're kind of in their space and they're trying to have a vacation, that can like rub people the wrong way. So you need to like kind of set the rules and read the room a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think it can be really fun, and I think most people do like to have that personal touch and the recommendations or share
Yeah.
a dinner together or something. I think most people probably do like it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's just up to you. It's whatever you want, really.
Yeah, it really is. And if you're doing that sort of a shared space, most likely the people who would book that sort of a thing would be open to that. It just depends on what you set up, right?
Yeah.
So Shantigue asks, how can I begin co-hosting? So first and foremost is you want to find people who are open to the idea of Airbnb. So a lot of times a lot of the people that I have hosted for, they are all down for the idea of Airbnb. They just have no idea how to get started, or they don't have the time, or they're just not interested in like, they just want to make the money. They're not interested in the intricacies and things that actually go into the hosting, right? So I had a client who I co-hosted for who actually owned a lot of rental property, wanted to dip his toes into this whole Airbnb thing, but he also self-managed his rental property. When I say a lot, he had like 30, 40, 50 plus, right? So he was like, my brain can't handle a whole nother type of business, right? Because it's a different operating system basically for short-term rentals versus your more traditional long-term rentals. So you want to find people who are open to that, and then approach them. And again, I have scripts and things like that on how to actually what to say to them. And but it's really just having that conversation, and you want to make sure you're targeting people who are open to the idea of Airbnb. And they're oftentimes like they can be traditional landlords. So again, going back to, is it hard to get started? You just have to be willing to make those introductions and have those conversations.
Yeah, to add to that, I would say first step one, figure out what kind of co-host you want to be. Like, are you going to be a remote co-host or are you going to be a local co-host? If you're a remote co-host, you still have to get other people to clean it and to be like a property manager to fix things or whatever. You need to have a handle on who's coming over if the plumbing breaks, who's coming over if the AC breaks.
Yep.
You have kind of a stable of people. And if you're local and you're going to kind of be more hands-on and maybe you're going to oversee the cleaning or maybe you're going to do some of the cleaning. I mean, there's different levels of what you can do.
Yep.
I was trying to dip my toes into or start co-hosting, figure that out. Like, are you going after a certain area, like a physical area? Or are you going to do everything remote? And then kind of put together, okay, like I'm a remote co-host. I'm going to be in your Airbnb account, dealing with all your listings, dealing with all of the questions from guests, but people are going to be on the ground doing everything else.
Right.
Or like what the percentage you're charging, figure out like your rates.
Absolutely.
Or are you like super hands-on in a certain area? And if I was trying to find people, I would probably find hosts in the area through like Facebook groups. There's tons of Facebook groups for Airbnb hosts. There's also LinkedIn groups for it. So I would get in there and start peddling your services and say,
Yeah.
I'm in California and I'm looking for 3 properties to manage.
Yeah. And you definitely want to set your terms up front with co-hosting so everyone is clear on what it is you do and what it is you don't do. And so again, in the program that I have, like I have all that set out so that you have your contracts as well as getting information about the property up front. And so what I mean by that is just the details and specifics of the property, like simple things like the Wi-Fi and simple things like where the breakers are, like having all the, and you'd be surprised how much of that information you need, because if the owner is super hands-off, then it's up to you to be able to answer those questions as they come along. So you just want to make sure you have everything set up front, ready to go, like you mentioned, your terms, like what is the percentage and all that stuff, so that everyone knows what's happening moving forward and what you're responsible for and what you're not. Okay, so I have another question by KG Hustle Guy. I think I said that right. Are y'all ever worried about theft or renters damaging your rental? I'll let you answer that first.
No. It would drive me crazy if I worried about that constantly. If you feel worried about that, then you probably don't know how to make a claim through Airbnb. So I would say figure that out. You basically, you need to get tight with your cleaner. They need to know your property and know if something's damaged or missing, because you have to report it before the next guest checks in, or within, I believe, 72 hours, you just start a claim. You don't have to have everything.
Right.
But basically being on top of that, I have never had anything that Airbnb hasn't paid for. I'm talking flooding floors. I had a guest fall into my bathroom vanity and smash it. I'm not going to stress out about it. Like, yeah. They pay for it. They pay for the labor to fix it. I usually get an upgrade of my item, like new floors, new this. I mean, I would just say that, no, I would never stress out about that. Airbnb's insurance policy is amazing. You should also have your own short-term rental insurance on top of Airbnb's policy. I've never had to use it.
Yeah.
But, insure yourself. If you think your guests are going to throw a party, if they're saying anything to that effect, I usually throw out either no, you're not coming, or I say, oh yeah, you can have a party, but it's $1,000 party fee or something like ridiculous price. And then, like, more than not having them there, if they think they have to pay the money, they'll either pay it, and then you're like, okay, have as many parties as you want for $1,000 or whatever it is, or they won't do it because they know if there's trash or signs of parties, like, they're gonna get charged, and people really don't like to get charged for that. So I do not stress out about people breaking stuff. If there's stuff you're worried about being broken in your rental and it's precious, it shouldn't be in your rental.
Yeah. So I agree. I don't stress about it. I'm more of a preventative. I take preventative measures. So for me, the units that I've had that were possibly prone to parties were my larger units. So anything 4 bedroom or so. I put that sort of language in my messaging that like party, you know, just letting people know parties, letting them know what the fees are, letting them know what type of security we have, and not in a aggressively like nasty way, but you know,
Right.
putting information out there ahead of time. When people see it who are trying to have a party, they already kind of are like, I mean, there are thousands of Airbnbs out there, so why would I go with this one who's going to charge me all this for if I do get caught having a party? So having those preventative measures in your system and in your workflow can really help, so that you don't have those sort of damages. And then it's sometimes the price of doing business that, yeah, maybe like you might have a flood. We actually have had damages sometimes that weren't caused by the guests. It was caused by Mother Nature, like a literal flood as well. And so, you know, you can report those things to Airbnb or whatever the case may be. And yeah, you just want to be on top of reporting your damages, like Alisha said. So you start your claim, and then you want to make sure you submit any evidence as well as like the cost of replacing something to Airbnb, and then also having that backup of short-term rental insurance. You have to remember that this is a business, right? So it's just like anything else. If you were doing traditional rentals, you often have just wear and tear damage. And that's another thing, like if you have your unit for quite some time, you're going to have just wear and tear. It's a lot of people coming in and coming out. So you have to kind of keep your maintenance up as well. So those are the kind of things you just have to keep in mind.
Someone just asked, how and why did Airbnb pay for flooding? So in my case, my dishwasher overflowed because the guest put rinse. They put soap in the rinse aid or rinse in the soap thing. They did something, or they put dish soap in the dishwasher, which I don't know if you guys have ever done that before, but it literally causes the whole thing to explode with bubbles and water.
Wait, repeat this again. I need to know what.
If you put dish soap in your dishwasher thing instead of dishwashing soap,
Okay.
like if you put like the dish soap for hand washing dishes, it like creates so many bubbles that it breaks the seal of the dishwasher and water leaks all over the floor.
Oh.
So word to the wise, make sure there's a very clear delineation between those soaps. And sometimes I even put a note on the dishwasher that's like, please make sure you do not put dish soap in the dishwasher, put dishwasher soap in here. So that happened. The guest ran the dishwasher and left for the day. So water was like sitting on the floor for hours. And it was very clear that there was like dish soap in there. So that's when I had a flood that Airbnb paid for, because it was like a guest that had put the wrong soap in there and caused a flood. And it was thousands of dollars. It was.
That's scary. In our situation, it was Mother Nature, but Airbnb helped the guests on the guest side, like, 'cause they had some stuff on the floor. So Airbnb helped them take care of like the cost of some of that damage, so it didn't come out of our pocket. But we just kind of worked with our Airbnb rep on that. Okay. Someone said, did you have funds when you started? So for me, and I think Alisha did too, we both started in our own properties when we would travel. So that really didn't cost us, at least in my case, anything. Yeah. That helped me get the money to be able to go out and lease. And I'm sure you built up, just saved for being able to buy. But there are also funding resources that you can utilize to fund your property. I have a couple of them in my course, but things as simple as even PayPal lending if you've got some sort of business or something going on already. But there are a lot of different options out there. I've even had students start with credit cards. Of course, you got to be careful with that. It's all about like what you can handle, what you have, and all that good stuff. But there are ways to start and fund this if you don't have the funds already. And then, of course, I always go back to co-hosting, because you can start that with little to no money. Mm-hmm. Do you ladies know of any resources to search for hosts? Okay, I think we kind of talked about that, about co-hosting. Cool. Okay, this is interesting. Lorraine says she's about to start her first Airbnb, but in the form of hostels, which has high demand here in Kenya. That is awesome. Do you think doing it so would be also profitable? I'm scared since it's the first time. So my answer to your question is do your research. Don't just go based off of what you think might work. Make a data-driven decision. So look and see, are there other, your question says hostels have a high demand. So in my head, I'm thinking that probably it will be profitable, but you want to do your research. You can use Airbnb, use sites like AirDNA. I don't know if they have data in Kenya. AirDNA and Mashvisor are two other sites that I like to use to do research. But being in Kenya, I know in Ghana, like we have an Airbnb in Ghana, they don't have that data. So I use Airbnb itself. I use Airbnb, other short-term rental platforms to see, well, how well are other similar properties getting booked and how does that look, so that you're not just kind of throwing it out there. But based off what you're saying, I think that could potentially be profitable. I don't know, like if you own this property yourself or if it's something that you're going out. I don't know if it's similar to Ghana where like you can rent, but usually, at least in Ghana, you have to like rent for the year. So I'm not doing that. Like you have to pay for the full year upfront of your, yeah. So yeah, it just depends on the numbers. So make sure the numbers look good. But that's exciting.
I'll pop that profit and loss tool again that I put in. I'll put it in the chat again because it's probably lost if you guys want to take a look at that YouTube video.
Yeah, I got to learn how to pin comments. That'll be for another day.
Yeah, we'll learn that later.
What insurance company do you suggest? There are a couple out there, and you got to go with which one is best for you. Let's see.
I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head. I had to get special short-term rental insurance in Hawaii because my property's less than 1,000 feet away from the ocean, which was a fun exercise.
I want to stay at your the more you talk about your property.
Come on over.
Okay, let's see. I'm looking for, if you have any other questions, drop them in the chat because we've been on for a little bit, so we might be popping off soon. But yeah, I think this is a good time to kind of wrap up. So tell everyone where they can find you, find more information about your programs and all that good stuff.
Sure. My website is alishaarnold.com. So that's, let me just pop it in the chat really quick.
Nice.
And then, you know, I'm on Instagram all the time. I'm on Pinterest. And then I'm going to put in my link to my course. And I'm doing a special discount code just for this live for St. Patrick's Day. It's going to expire the day after St. Patrick's Day. I've never done this before, so it's a 70% off code. I'm putting it in here. It's Nana70. So if you guys are interested in the kind of like, I have the place, but now I need to get it live course, it's in here, and the page kind of goes through all of the modules in the course. Like, let me know if you have any questions about that, but there you go. Special code just for this live today. Yay.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So guys, definitely check her out. Follow her on Instagram. She posts really cute reels. And for me, if you are interested in any of my programs, they're all at the link in my bio. If you're kind of trying to figure out what you want to do, you can also check out my ebook bundle. That's a great way to kind of dip your toes in the water. It's both my Airbnb ebook bundle is bundled with my Travel Nurse Hosting ebook as well. And I like this last question here. They have any themed Airbnbs? I'll let you answer first.
Yeah, both of mine have light themes. I actually talk about this a lot in my content. I have coached people that have very themed, like dog friendly, Vermont rental, like that's kind of the theme, or like mermaid rental, Disney rentals, llama rentals. Like there's you can get pretty extreme with it, which is really cool. Yeah. But mine are kind of lighter themes. Like this is a wine country theme, and it's boho wine country, and then like the pool is kind of a piece of that too. My one in Hawaii is also kind of boho themed, which is different. Most rentals in Hawaii are very traditional Hawaii decor, but I kind of try to do something a little bit different and more modern so that it would stand out. And I do like to do themes. Like for me, I don't want to do like really far out there themes. It's just kind of not my style, but I think it is really important to differentiate your property in some way. So
Mm-hmm.
just, I talk about finding that hook that you can advertise, basically like what would you talk about on your Instagram account if you had a rental. So figuring out what that is really important to like making your rental stand out from everyone else's. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that idea.
So for me, my properties have always been just like nice and cute. Either I've had like really high-end luxury sort of, so not quite a theme, just more luxe, or
Mm-hmm.
I had very quirky, very artsy, because that's kind of in the past was more my aesthetic because I always designed them myself. My next couple that I want to do, especially here in the Las Vegas metro area, I kind of want to do like a swanky glamour theme. Um,
And
yeah, like more of a swanky kind of a bachelor pad one, and then more of a glam. But I too have never gone deep into those like extreme themes. Like I had a fellow host that I'd worked with, and they did, this is when Stranger Things was like really popular, and I never really watched Stranger Things, so I didn't know all the things about it, but they did a Stranger Things um Airbnb, and like literally everything looked like the show. Like I don't, if you're a fan, you know the things, but it was obviously a themed property, and that's really cool. Especially if it's something that is huge right now. The only thing with that is that when that whatever your theme is, when you're that extreme, if it falls off, you have to change your theme up, unless like you always have those diehard people who want to stay there. So but it's such a specific um theme that you're only catering to a few people. I know people did Game of Thrones themes for a while, a couple years ago, but then that kind of crashed. So it all depends on what you want to do, but there's room for everything and everyone out there. So
I've seen people do like extensions of their brand in an Airbnb. So like a goat themed like farm Airbnb for a goat farmer. Um, like an antique dealer that has one that's all her antiques. Like I think it's a really interesting way to kind of bring your business into another facet. Like, so I think that it really helps if it's your passion and like they're, the antique dealer, for instance, like is in an area where antiques are huge and it's like and there's like a huge antique show every year. And I just thought that was like super cool. And then like the farm experience is really cool. I've seen, like I've said, like llamas,
yeah.
goats, lots of different things like that. And those are like people that probably do live on those properties and they have like a little in-law unit or something that they're wanting to rent out and make it into a special space. So I think that's just such a cool extension of someone's brand that they already have established. And to like that into the short-term rentals is just like it's so cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. So you can definitely get creative with it. And don't be afraid to stand out. And it's something you want to do, especially like I said, I started in 2014. There's so many more hosts now, so many more properties. So anything you can do to make your property stand out is going to work in your favor for sure. So thank you all so much for joining us and sticking with us and all of your awesome questions. Again, go ahead and follow Alisha on her Instagram, and you can check out her course. She gave us a nice little promo code as well. So check that out. And then, of course, all of my programs, my travel nurse hosting program, my Airbnb program, as well as my ebooks are all with the link in my bio. So check us both out. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
see you
So
next
fun.
time. All right. Bye.
Bye.